No. Yeah. Amy Vilela is running for election to the U.S. House to represent Nevada's first congressional district. You may remember her speaking at the rally for Bernie Sanders' presidential run in Nevada. I was there for that, and I was incredibly moved when Ms. Vilela called for Medicare for All and told the story about how her own 22-year-old daughter died after being turned away from a hospital due to a perceived, not even a real, lack of insurance. Insane. As the state co-chair, Amy led the charge for Bernie Sanders' landslide victory in the Nevada caucuses. You remember that. Ms. Vilela has been endorsed by the Sunrise Movement for her bold commitment to the Green New Deal, and none too soon, as Lake Tahoe is suffering from an extreme wildfire and the world suffering from a global pandemic. If elected, she would be the first ever active duty military spouse to serve in Congress. We have her campaign video right here. Take a look, and then we'll be back with a great interview. I'm looking forward to talking with her.
The struggle is real. Trust me, I've lived it. Throughout my life, I have experienced the pain our broken system causes in so many ways. I grew up poor, raised by a single mother. And then, as a young single mother myself, I fought my way out of poverty for my children. I took classes at night to get through college, becoming the first in my family to earn a degree. I became an accountant and later a CFO. Just when I thought I had it all, the illusion was shattered. I was reminded that we are only as safe as the most vulnerable among us. You may have heard the story of how my daughter, Shalyn, died at the hands of our profit-driven healthcare system. You may have seen me on Netflix or traveling across the country fighting for the political revolution. I never thought politics was for someone like me until I realized the political choices we make are quite literally life and death. From COVID to climate change, the status quo isn't working for regular people like us. Now's the time to elect bold leaders who will fight to change our current system that favors the rich and punishes the poor. Now's the time for leaders to fight like lives depend on it, because they do. I'm Amy Vilela, and I'm running for Congress because we deserve more. Nevada deserves more.
I'm Amy Vilela, and I approve this message. Join us today. Visit amyvilela.com.
Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the program. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here today.
I'm very excited to see you at least sort of in person, face to face, after seeing your very moving speech in Nevada, one of them in Nevada for Bernie Sanders. I do want to say that I'm very sorry for what happened as your daughter was turned away from care and subsequently died by our for-profit system.
Yeah, that was a really tough experience for me. And it's why healthcare is so personal. And it's why I entered politics in 2017. That was following the death of Shalyn. She died in 2015 at the age of 22 from a preventable illness. She had her whole life ahead of her. And, instead of treating her, they did what's called a wallet biopsy and discriminated against her based on what her perceived insurance status was. And basically, they actually told her to go get insurance and see a specialist. They went to a doctor's office when she went to an emergency room. She had every symptom and risk factor for a blood clot. She was Black with sickle cell trait, just had sustained an injury for a torn ACL, was on birth control, and just traveled 22 hours to come home to Las Vegas.
Was it like a desk person who just said, "Oh, no insurance, get out"? Or did a doctor even?
So when she first went to the emergency room, she was greeted and they told her, it's going to be very expensive. I was out of town and they were calling me to ask about insurance status, wanting us to call to try to get her on her insurance, which she did not qualify for. There's a difference between military insurance and civilian insurance. She didn't qualify because she had just started schooling and it hadn't started. So she did not qualify for TRICARE, which is military insurance. They told her, you can leave now. It's going to be very expensive. And she's like, no, there's something really wrong. And I'm like, Shalyn, just be seen. We'll worry about that later. When she went to the back, she kept begging for additional testing for something for the pain. And they told her to go get insurance and see a specialist. That was from the physician's assistant.
Amy, I can't tell you how sorry I am for for you having to go through that. And your story is similar to stories we're hearing across the country. Um,
It was
I'm
tragic.
I am very glad that you are running, and it is, galvanizing moments like that have caused people to come into the public sphere. So I appreciate that, and I do offer you our condolences. Can you talk about, Nevada has gone through the pandemic like we all have. Can you talk about the people of Nevada? And are they a little closer to understanding your platform, which is Healthcare for All, versus the platform of who's in power now, which is let's fix the prescription drug prices, but I'm not going to go all the way to make sure everyone's covered.
Right. One of the last things I said to my daughter, she was dying in my arms, was, well, you will not have died in vain. And I intend to do everything in my power to make sure I keep that promise to her. And that included me, getting involved in fighting for Medicare for All. I have been working for years on this issue, throwing healthcare rallies, traveling through Nevada as well across the country, sharing Shalene's story over and over again to really stress the importance and the need for universal health care. I've been able to move the needle in Nevada quite a bit. I successfully lobbied 2 of our Congress members to co-sponsor Medicare for All. We still have a lot of work to do. People are realizing, though, that we deserve more. And it's not just in healthcare, it's across the board. We deserve more. We deserve to have a livable wage. We deserve to have a Green New Deal. We deserve to be able to have affordable housing, and so much more. And, with the pandemic, this has only stressed and really amplified the need for us to have this bold legislation, not only talked about, we need to bring it to the floor. We need to organize and work tirelessly around the clock to make sure that it's brought to the floor and passes.
I think it's so important to have people like yourself with lived experience, including, you talked about having been homeless. Cori Bush, who over the summer, Cori Bush of Missouri, over the summer slept out on the steps of the Capitol to bring attention to the fact that millions of Americans were about to become homeless themselves due to the failure of the government to act to extend the eviction moratorium. Cori Bush, who supports you and has come out to support your campaign, she talks about having been homeless in her life. How important do you think it is for the United States to have members of Congress and other elected officials who truly understand from a first person point of view issues of poverty and other issues from personal experience?
I think it's so extremely important. I mean, Cori knows, like I know, what it's like to be a single mom, unhoused, with children, not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, how you're going to get secure housing, where you're going to get food. I mean, I remember trying to decide, should I pay the electric bill or the gas bill? Do I have friends or family that I can take my kids to their home and bathe them? I've lived in a 400 square foot home with 2 children by myself, and barely making it. And your lived experience really drives your fight and your perception when you're dealing with legislation, right? So when we talk about people needing universal childcare, when you haven't had to sit there and drop your children off at a daycare that you don't feel comfortable with because you can't afford more, and you're sitting at work with your stomach in knots, knowing that your children aren't getting the best care possible, but you don't have an option because you have to feed them, then maybe that's not as important for them. Maybe it's not something they're going to fight for and drive that legislation for, right? When they talk about bills, that are going to have support systems, if you haven't had to have that struggle, then there probably isn't an urgency, most likely, in making sure that we have legislation in place that is actually addressing the needs of working class Americans.
See, I think you are a major force and a threat even to the establishment, really established Democrats, and also, my words, not yours, but the corporate interests that have infiltrated our politics, obviously on both sides. How are you financing your campaign, and have you seen big money come out against you?
Well, we definitely are not taking any corporate money. I know firsthand the effects of corporate money influence in politics. And I know from my own background, I was a CFO, that corporations don't donate because they believe in good governance. They donate because they want a return on their investment. That is the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And we have seen what happens when progressives run. The establishment will dump a lot of money and do whatever they can. They will almost fight harder against a progressive than they will a Republican to make sure they don't get into office. So with that in mind, we definitely need be ready to have our war chest ready. I think one of the most important things for my campaign right now is to make sure that we are fundraising so that we have the tools necessary to fight back and to win this. And I know we can win this. We will need people's help. I will need everyone who's watching or interested in this campaign to please consider donating. Right now, it's the most important time in the campaign is in the beginning so that we can set up and get out there and meet people where they are in the community. And definitely I'd urge anyone watching to go to amy.vegas/act and donate as much as you can. This is so important at this time. And we can use this to really fight back and win this race.
amyvilela.org is also a place you can go. Is that right?
Yes.
What would a Green New Deal mean for Nevada? You've got the places on fire. The beautiful places that touch the hearts of not just people in Nevada, but anyone who's ever been to Lake Tahoe just has a special place in their heart for it. The fact that it's had such devastating wildfires certainly brings into full focus that a climate, urgent action on climate needs to be done. Do you think the people of Nevada are moving toward your point of view?
Most definitely. There are a lot of frontline community organizers that are working tirelessly on this issue. To give you an idea of how there's a disconnect between our leaders and the constituents in Nevada, every one of our federal legislators right now are supporting a bill that would actually increase the size of Las Vegas by the size of Washington, D.C. While we're facing a water shortage, we have record low ever for Lake Mead, which is our reservoir. In addition to what's happening, we're on fire up in the north. I mean, there is a huge disconnect, and it's a giveaway. Right now, they're more interested in doing giveaways to developers. This would also have a direct impact on our most vulnerable communities. We have a huge housing shortage in Nevada for affordable housing. And the environment, when we talk about the communities that get the most, it's always our urban communities. You could have a difference of 20 degrees from our urban core to the suburbs. So this is, it's very intersectional. When we talk about the Green New Deal, having a Green New Deal would mean that we would be investing in our most at-risk communities. We'd be creating jobs. We'd make sure that we were addressing, the climate crisis that's facing not only Nevada, but the rest of the country, and making sure that we are addressing the racial disparities also that we see in climate justice. So it would be well received by the majority of Nevadans.
Amy, I don't know if this is too personal, but do you think race played a part with your daughter being turned away from service at the hospital?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we talk about systemic racism, I mean, this is, I went to the same hospital with a bad case of heartburn. I was not asked for my insurance when I immediately arrived. I was given, a CAT scan, I was given EKG, I was given intravenous pain medication and held for observation. My daughter was not given those same opportunities. I've seen it time and time again, with all of my children. I've seen the disparity, the differences in the way that they are treated versus the way I am treated. I've, had people talk to me, as if they don't realize who my family is, that I'm a multicultural, multiracial family, that they take liberties in discussing their feelings very openly with me. We have to be.
And then you're like, this is my daughter, and oh God. Oh.
My husband, my husband's
my husband
from
yes.
Brazil. I mean, so yes, when we talk about, systemic racism, it does exist. I have had a front row seat and have seen it, and it cost my daughter, her life.
Amy, I think you're a fascinating candidate because you're like a real progressive, and you're also would be the first ever active duty military spouse to serve in Congress. So you'd have that connection to the military.
Yes.
People often think that the military are, mostly on the right. Talk about the positions that you might take given your knowledge of what it is to be a military family.
We definitely need to have someone who has actual skin in the game, who is talking about the need to stop the endless wars. We need to be going towards diplomacy, not war, and talking about the actual treatment of our veterans and our military members. I mean, there is a huge sacrifice. And once they're done, we have all the money in the world, to support the wars, but we somehow never have the money to actually support our veterans. Our veterans need to have care, and they need to be able to transition back into society in substantial, meaningful ways. When we talk about mental health care, I can't even tell you how much of our population, the majority of our homeless population in Las Vegas, are veterans, and they don't have what they need in order to be able to secure housing, to get mental health care, to get health care. It's gross, and we need to have people who are actually speaking to that. When we talk about, also military families and their pay and how they're treated and the school systems. I mean, there's lots of peculiarities that are specific to military families and veterans. And I think it's time we have someone in office that actually, like I said, has skin in the game and can speak to those.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to people in Nevada who are, considering voting for you as a candidate and voting, or possibly voting for the other Democrat as a candidate in the upcoming primary? What would you say to get the message about the differences between your platforms?
We deserve more. And we need to have a representative that understands the urgency of now. Not only in the state of Nevada, but across the country, we are facing unprecedented crises. We are seeing it with our environment. We are seeing it in not having enough affordable housing. We are seeing our immigrant community time and time again left out. Las Vegas has one of the highest undocumented per capita constituency in the United States. I mean, we need people who are actually going to go to Congress and fight and work tirelessly around the clock to make sure that we get this legislation on the floor and passed. And that means working with our frontline community members. It means going out and listening to our community, and then having, being bold enough and having the drive to actually fight for these issues in Congress. And that is what I plan to do, is to bring the fight to Congress, to represent the people in Nevada and the first district who are being hurt the most by these things, to make sure we have a voice and that we are heard and we are fighting this fight.
I wish you all the best, Amy. I really, really do. I know that you will never compromise because you're in there for more than just the paycheck. You're in there because you're fighting for, a moral fight given an immorality that happened to you and your family. So thank you so much for stepping up, for doing that. I know it can't be easy. And I encourage everyone watching to go to Amy Vilela, VILELA.org, or hashtag Amy, the number 4, the people, which I believe is the Facebook, right? Amy for the people on Facebook.
That's Twitter and Instagram.
And Instagram. Just Google. It's not that hard. You'll find her all over the place. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And I hope to see you again here with us.
Thanks for having me. We got this.
We got this. I wish you all the best. I don't see you losing. And even if you do, I don't see you stopping. So I'm looking forward to where you go.
Thank you so much for having me.